All right, so today we're going to talk about the data analysis process, just kind of a basic overview of how we approach a problem from beginning to end. And we'll notice that a lot of times my experience has been that we don't really think of this as a holistic process. We think about chunks, about how it's time to, let's come up with a question, let's answer it and move on. And really trying to spend time to think about the process, think about how we go from step one to step two to step three is a very valuable skill. So from Keeping Up with the Quants by Davenport and Kim, they have a nice little framework, which I really thought was a nice way of framing this idea. They call it the 3 stages and 6 steps of quantitative analysis. I'm going to focus more or less on probably 4 stages. I'm going to break it down a little differently. But if you look over here, we start on the left with the idea of framing the problem, defining the problem, what's actually happening in this situation. And this is often the step that gets left out the most. Most people say, I'm going to jump right in. I know what I want to do. Let's just go ahead and start figuring it out, dive into that data. And it turns out to be a big overstep. So what we want to do is really spend that time on the front end to understand what is our problem. How do we want to go about it? What types of data is out there? How am I going to collect it? What has been done in the past? If you noticed here in the slide, there's a problem recognition, what is actually happening, and then seeing what else has been done to study and to research that problem in the past or in a parallel path. So we really want to spend a lot of time at the front end really having a good idea of what is happening and what we're really focused on. The second stage is really focused on solving the problem. Now I will actually they have it as modeling, data collection, and then data analysis. The modeling and data collection, I'd almost put that in the framing of the problem section. Because really to understand the problem, we also start to come up with ideas of how we want to broach it and where are we collecting that data. Most people, when they think about this process, they focus on what is listed here as step 5. They say that data analysis, that's my goal. I need to dive into the data and do all the work. We'll find out through the course of this class, while that is a focal point of this class, is how do you actually analyze data? How do you model it? How do you learn from it? We'll find out that that step is actually one of the, I won't say the least important, but it's of lesser importance than what most people think. Because most people focus on the data analysis and ignore what the actual problem is, where are we going to get our data, how are we going to clean it, until it becomes a little bit too late. The final step is on communicating and acting on the result, and that is of primary importance. If you do all the greatest analysis in the world, but you can't actually communicate those results to anybody else in any meaningful manner, then your analysis has lost most of its momentum. Now, what I did is I took an example of how most people envision the data analysis process from my mindset, from my experience, from other classes, from other projects. And if you notice here that we have a short amount of time of actually framing the problem, then we think about, then I'm just going to go out and collect some data and it'll all be nice and neat for me. But then the real work comes in. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work on solving the problem and modeling it and figuring out, diving into the computer and figuring all this out. And boy, that's going to be the time where I spend all my focus, time, energy. And then at the end, I'll just pass it on to somebody else, and I'll give my report to my boss and move on out. And actually, the time we usually see in practice, it's almost flipped on its head. You notice here that I have the framing of the problem as a more sizable portion of the timeline, so to speak, because spending that time really understanding what's happening is absolutely essential. What most people don't understand, and when we work on projects throughout the course of this program, is that the data collection and cleaning part is often the most time-consuming and kind of the most tedious process. A lot of people believe that they walk in and they have a data set and they're just going to go right to it. We've seen in textbooks we get lots of nice, neat data and magically everything works out. And it turns out in practice that's simply not the case. a lot of times we have to spend most of our work really understanding what the data is and getting it in the right format. When it comes to the solving of the problem, notice I've shrunk that down to almost nothing, because solving of the problem, we have computers to do that. And if you've really spent enough time understanding the problem, cleaning the data, getting it prepared, and really understanding what technique you're going to use to answer the question, the actual solving part is not too taxing. Yes, we do have computers to do it. We are going to learn. We're going to lift that hood through the course of your next few semesters of learning what the computer is doing and really understanding it. But that level of understanding, we'll see that once we get to that point of solving the problem, if you've set it up correctly, it becomes very simple. And then the final step, which I've also expanded, is interpreting and communicating the results. Once again, to make the results meaningful to somebody, we need to be able to speak in their language, to communicate what we've done. And that process takes a much longer time than a lot of people expect. A couple tips about the process, just to kind of keep, and this is repetitive somewhat, but don't neglect defining the problem. It's often the most important and the most overlooked aspect, as a lot of people like to jump right into it and say, I'm going to just solve it. They don't really think about what they're trying to solve. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That time you spend, an hour spent trying to really understand and define your problem, could be worth 5 to 10 hours later of just saying, oh, I never really thought of it that way. Now I have to pivot and try something new. The numbers are nice, but interpretation and communication of the result is key. If you can't explain it, then what was the use? And we really need to understand how to communicate to our audience. Our audience, you're in this program of master's level of analytics, business analytics. Many people you talk to won't have the same background as you. So you need to be able to take those results that you understand at a deeper level and communicate what it means to someone who is at a different state.